Welcome back to another episode of Business Flow with Sume and Joe. Today we're talking all about value. Joe, what do you got to say about this topic, man?
Value, everybody wants to receive that $1 million, but if you want to receive a lot, you got to learn to give a lot. And so, like, it's real easy to say, have our affirmation, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire. But if you want to receive a million, you got to learn to give 10 million. And so I think that that's where this topic should really start is that, giving is better than receiving because giving starts the receiving process. And we all want to receive the money, and it all comes from our ability to give value. So, let's just start there, the giving part, and what does value mean to you in terms of flow and giving and business?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, I was looking at the scale of consciousness from Dr. David R. Hawkins. A lot of people are familiar with it. It's from his book, Power versus Force. And what's so interesting is that he mentions after 200, which is the level of courage, that's when it becomes much more of an expansive energy. So that's power. Whereas below 200 is force, where you're not giving energy. It's energy draining in a sense. So I feel that when you're giving lots of value, that's the scale, that's the level of willingness. So when you have this willingness to give, when you have this productivity engine and you're like, yeah, man, I'm giving value, I'm opening up the pathways in my mind and my heart. And I think that's what really starts to get people to get lots of revenue, get lots of clients, make things happen is from that energy. And what value means to me, it's like this idea of worthiness and deserving, right? I think it goes back to our storylines and how we see ourselves. Like if you take a $5 note, you crumple it up, right? It still has value. So if life crumples us up, guess what? We still have value.
That's right. Even a baby has value. A newborn baby is 6 months old. It's cute. It's adorable. But it doesn't have to do anything to be valuable. It's valuable just for being alive, And sometimes I don't understand why people don't understand and appreciate their value, because just being alive and the just your essence and your beingness has a value to it. And I think it's real easy to overlook that. And one of the things that I see is I think a lot of times we feel like we're giving and giving and giving, and it's like, why am I not receiving? And one of the metaphors I use all the time is this idea of, are you scattered like a light bulb, or are you focused like a laser beam? Because you can give in a scattered way, or you can give in a focused way. What's your basic idea, or what's your perception of, I'm sure you've had this experience where you were very giving, and it's like, why am I not receiving? It's like, what comes up for you around that?
So I think of this idea almost like, you never really know when you're going to get value back, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to, in 4 weeks, I'm going to get the value that I gave. So it's never in the form of actual currency. It could be spiritual currency or emotional currency, right? So I like to look at the image of learning from nature. So a tree just gives. You can punch a tree. You could just try to chop it down, whatever, right? It's still going to give in a sense. So the same with a river, right? It's giving to all the animals that drink from it, whatever comes across it, it's still giving. So this idea of this endless abundance, right? That I never run out, my cup overflowing. I think that's a powerful mentality to have. What do you think about that?
I think you're tapping into something really important here. Sometimes we give in the East, but we receive in the West. Like we give, it's like Steve Jobs talks about the secret to life, and he talks about one of the things you learn about life is you poke something, and something emerges somewhere else. You don't necessarily know, but when you realize that I can impact the world, and when I do, there's a chain of things that happen. And sometimes we give in the West, but we receive in the East. We give in one place. And if you expect, if I give here, I'm going to receive here, you might actually get into some trouble. but like you give here, but then it shows up somewhere else. Why don't you talk about that? Like maybe just the detachment and being unattached to like how it you're doing, like, shows up.
Right. So essentially, I heard this from this guy who has this program called Charisma Mastery. Essentially, what he said is you've got to give up predictive control for process control. Right. So you don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to get it next week. You're trying to predict like this thing of happening. It's more about trusting the process and knowing that this process is going to get me the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, essentially. So that detachment from outcome, again, it's like one of the laws of manifestation, right? It's like you can be so attached to the outcome. You got to have massive aligned action, but attachment comes from this frequency of fear. It's like when we're attached to something, it's like, oh, I don't want to lose it. So it's still in that scarcity mindset.
Now there is something that happens though that like when you like say you get a customer, it's like okay, I have a program. It's $5,000. You're going to pay me 10 payments of $500 or whatever, and so that you pay the first payment. There's some kind of expectation that I'm giving and they're receiving because there is this agreement, and so there's like this giving in a way that there is no expectation, but there's also like when two people put their minds together and say, okay, we're going to do business together, we're going to have this agreement. That isn't it fair to expect that if I give every month that the payment comes in every month, and it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes people say, I'm not getting value from this, or I just don't want to buy this anymore, or there's a certain integrity that's super important. But what comes up for you about like, okay, there's times when you give without the expectation, but then there's times you give and there's a reasonable expectation that both sides are going to keep their agreements.
Yeah, I think agreements are really important because an agreement is an intention, right? It's an intention out into the universe. So when you were first working with me, Joe, you said that you will continue working with me until I made my money back. I mean, that's an agreement, right? And so that level of trust that you gave me allowed me to fully commit to that process of you being my coach at that time. So I think that that agreement aspect is really important. And I think the reason why our partnership works so well is we're very different typed brained people, right? I'm much more in the right brain, you're in the left brain. So your structure with my creativity, we could actually thrive with that energy and create something magical. So I think that, yeah, I think it's important to expect, but don't expect nothing because you're going to get nothing, right? You got to expect something, but it's like not expecting so much that it's going to skew you off the path.
Well, an expectation is expecting nothing is still an expectation, and it's not a very good one. Like it's like I trust you to like fuck me over every single time. It's like that distrust really sabotages value, and it's so important to trust that I'm giving, with an understanding that you're going to give back, and that flow.
It's like when a monk says to give up all desire, that's still a desire. You know what I mean?
A desire to have no desire.
Is that you can't escape that game. It's still like a part of it. So expectation is like the placebo effect, right? It's like, hey, it's still gonna get you something. If you're going to expect something, you're gonna get something. It's called, I think it's the Pygmalion effect, actually. Yeah, the Pygmalion effect states that if you expect something, like kids in a classroom, if they expect that they're going to do really well, they're going to get better grades. And so we need some level of expectation and trust.
Yeah, there's something really interesting about how environment impacts value. If you take an average kid and put them around geniuses, they'll perform way better. If you take an average kid and put around a bunch of losers, they're going to drop as well. And environment impacts value.
Totally. It's like how they say success leaves clues, right? So being around the right environment is definitely valuable, right? It's like, what is your net worth, right? Network is your net worth. Again, another one of these idioms or phrases. Yeah, it's very true.
There's an idea around value. I think this is one of the most powerful things. I want to really open this conversation, that Value is in the perception of the buyer. Like it really starts there. So in other words, if I can bring you 10 million in value, if I can, or let's say 4 million, if I bring you a million in newfound, or 4 million in newfound profit, would you share a quarter with me? So 4 million in new dollars is found. Would you give me $1 million if I help put 4 million, in your bank account? Will you give one of those back to me because I helped create something that you wouldn't have had otherwise? And so if the buyer perceives that you bring that extra 4 million, they'll pay you $1 million if they perceive you as bringing them $1 million. But there's this other thing that even if I bring you 4 million in value, if you don't perceive my value is worth that $1 million, if you only perceive my value is worth $100, you're not going to give me 101. And so, like, the best way to have high perceived value is to deliver high real value. But even if you deliver a ton of high real value, that doesn't guarantee that the buyer perceives it. And so there's this extra obligation in our communication so that the people we're working with not only see that I'm bringing 4 million of value to you, but like you couldn't have gotten this on your own, and that it is valuable. And so it's not good enough to just bring you that 4 million, but it's important that you get it on your side and say, you know what, because Sume showed up that way, or because Joe showed up that way, gosh, 4 million, I'm super grateful. Yes, of course I'll share that. But if people perceive like, oh, you didn't have to do anything for it, they're not going to pay you 101. What's your thoughts as I share that? I think it's a huge concept.
Yeah, it's so true. Perception creates reality. It's very true. And I love one of these clarifying questions that you have at the end of your calls, which is, what was valuable about this conversation?
What was most valuable about our call today?
Yeah, and I think we're both here on this podcast to, show up and give value, and that by itself creates this momentum, right? In the flow state, they have challenge and skills, right? You have to have a high level of challenge and a high level of skills to stay in that flow state, but it's actually perceived challenge and perceived skills. So if you feel you perceive this as too challenging, it might not be challenging, but you perceive it, well, it's going to affect your flow state, right? So
you're not even going to try, or you're going to have resistance.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a huge aspect.
Yeah. And another part of value, I think it's super important, is you don't get paid what you're worth. You get paid what you negotiate. And so you can bring a lot of value. If I bring, I might say, okay, let's work together. And I say, okay, I'm going to charge $10,000 an hour, and we work together for 4 hours. And so you pay me $40,000 and you make 4 million. Well, in a way, like, you win and I lose. Like, so it's super important to not only bring on the value, but to make sure you negotiate it up front, because you can't really go back after the fact and renegotiate after you negotiate. I mean, 40,000 is 40,000. It sounds like a lot of money, but in the context of you paid me 40,000, but you made 4 million, is that really fair? And so there's two issues with that. Number one is, did you negotiate well? And number two is, did you have the self-esteem to ask for what you were worth? Because you can bring the value, but that doesn't mean that the compensation is fair or just. And so maybe you could riff on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think negotiation, we need it for anything, right? To deal with conflicts, to be able to have a great communication line with people, right? So if you're not negotiating what you're worth, I mean, people are going to give you a value or stamp a label on you. This is what you're worth, right?
So if you don't know your value, somebody else will assign it to you.
Exactly. And I think that in terms of negotiation, it's a collaborative energy, right? So it's win-win instead of this competitive energy. And I think a lot of people get into business to try and, like, I'm going to have the upper hand, or like, I'm going to try to stick it to the man, or I'm going to try to get to the top. And that mindset, after a while, that hubris and that pride just like takes over. We see it in every single movie, right? Where you use force rather than power. and that just makes you crumble down. It's actually lower vibration energy. And so when you can have that negotiation energy, it just changes the whole game.
Yeah, if both sides win, if I win and you win, it's like we're gonna want to like repeat this. But if you if like, oh, he won but I lost, it's like there's that saying, you know, that which is rewarded is repeated, that which is not rewarded is not repeated, and that which is punished is extinguished. And if you feel like, wow, I brought all this value, I was flowing all this value to this other person and they were greedy, I think greed kills deals on both sides. I can be too greedy as far as asking for too much, and you can be too greedy as far as taking too much, you know, and greed kills deals on both sides, but it's from flow, it's from abundance, it's from abundance, I think. When we can both tap into the abundance, then there could be a higher exchange of value and a higher exchange of cash flow.
Wow, Joe, you brought up something very interesting. I've thought about this concept for a while, and maybe you can speak into this a little bit. And I was thinking about this idea of the 7 deadly sins, you know, and greed is one of them. And there's this concept of that these sins are created from a sense of lack, right? So greed is not enough money, lust is not enough sex. So this not enough quality or this scarcity is what creates these sins. And sin is an archery term, which simply means you missed your mark. So basically, if you're sinning, you're not on the right direction. You're not, you know, you just need to redirect.
Yeah, and why not tap into the abundance? Why not, you know, like I think that again, greed kills deal. You know, you got the employee says, you know, give me a pay raise, you know, but they weren't doing the work. And then you've got the employer saying, you know, show me that you can do the work over a long period of time and maybe I'll give you. And the greed can kind of create resentment on both sides of the equation. And I think if we come from a place of as long as I'm giving and you're giving and we're both adding and tapping into the abundance, like you said, you know, greed is a lower energy vibration and it doesn't serve anyone. You know, another idea around value is about becoming the expert or becoming the authority. You know, when we are more expert or we have more authority, we have more what's the word I want to use? Credibility or more. You know, I learned that I think that we're more valuable. I learned this idea that what's the word I want to use? Your what's the word I want to use? Credibility is not just your expertise, but it's your expertise blended with your humanity.
Yeah.
Credibility is not just your expertise, it's your expertise. So if you have the credibility, if you have expertise, but you don't have the humanity, then you're not as valuable. But if you've got the expertise and you bring that human, you know, like that value of the human beings involved, I think that adds so much. So there's this expertise, authority, credibility, and when we blend humanity with it, I think we're more valuable. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think another level of it is also that authenticity, right, along with that humanity, because a lot of the times, a lot of different products and things are trying to manufacture authenticity, right? It's like, oh, look how I am, you know, look how awesome this product is, and we really do care, you know, and they emphasize that, but it's off-putting, you know, people can smell it from a mile away, and I think that a great way to know your own expertise is actually starting to say, like, if I valued myself 100%, what would I be doing differently, right? And that changes your mindset in a sense. And, you know, one of the tasks that I give my clients is to make a values list. It's like what you stand for and what you don't stand for.
Yeah.
And once you have that, you start to speak with a lot more expertise because you know yourself. You have self-awareness.
That's really good. That's really good. Yeah, because when you know what you bring to the table and you know what's important, and when you have high values, you know, there's a scriptural concept that, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the gates of heaven. And I always had a difficulty with understanding that and how, but, when you tie it to this other concept that, Christ said, love God the Father and love your fellow man. And why is it so difficult for the rich man to enter heaven? Because the rich man can have a tendency to love money and use people, but we're commanded to love God and love people. And if we love money over people, it's like if we love money and use people, it's kind of icky and gross. But if we love people and then just simply use money as a tool, it's no issue. It's like it's a non-issue. And so I think a large part of value, that's why this thing of it, so what if you've got the expertise, if you don't have the humanity, if you don't care about the human beings, you don't deserve to make a lot of money. Like if you're actually like putting money over humans, that's dark. It's evil. It's like, it's not good. But if you're capable of like, okay, let's make, let's serve people, and like if we prosper in the process, and we have this value exchange, then it's like an amazing thing, because people matter, and that is valuable. Go ahead.
And I think that there's another powerful technique that I want to share with the audience. A lot of the times when we see very successful or wealthy people, we have this feeling inside that they're better than us, or we put them on some kind of a pedestal, right? So with this technique, I'm going to allow the audience to actually humanize people instead of iconize them. Now, what you do is imagine what this person has gone through in their entire life, right? So when they're a baby, they're been everywhere, vomiting, up to the time when they're maybe 80 years old plus, and they have a cane. And just seeing their entire timeline, you start to see that man as, okay, he's rich, but that's just a chapter in his life, like it's chapter 11. But he has a whole story to go through. Yeah, exactly. So we never really know the full story just by the image that we see of somebody. So that's a really powerful technique if you're ever intimidated by someone with a lot of money.
Yeah, I like that, because we don't know what other people have been through. We don't know their journey. We do know how people treat us, and if they treat us with care and respect and, and that humanity, we feel that. We also know that when people are kind of like covetous or, like me, I don't care about you, we feel that energy too. And as soon as you feel that slimy energy, it lowers their value from my point of view. It feels yucky. I want to go to another idea about value, and that's this idea of conveying your uniqueness. Are you the same? In the marketplace, we offer, we give to receive. And if we give the exact same things as others, it doesn't seem to have as much value as if we bring something unique to the table. And that's one of the huge power principles I learned from Jay Abraham, is this idea of, unique selling proposition or unique purchase appeal of, are you playing the game as everyone else, or are you doing something better, enhanced, giving more value? Are you playing the game different? If I take a case of water and I put it next to another case of water and I say, okay, this case is a case of water, it's $10. This is 10% off. It's $9. Okay. But then I have a third case and I say, okay, here's a case of water, it's $10, but if you buy this case, you get a bonus foam cooler. Okay. The first two are water versus water, $10 versus $9. But now if I go $10 for water versus $10 for water with cooler, now it's unique, it's special, it's different, and now it's not an apples to apples comparison. They've added value because, by adding the foam cooler, we've added uniqueness. We've added something that now we can't even compare it to the other waters because it's not even the same category anymore. How have you made yourself unique in all the stuff you do with flow and flow state? Made yourself more valuable than other just performance coaches out there?
Right. I think this is a huge element where I've started to use that flow cycle element of like, struggle phase, release phase, flow, and then rest. The struggle phase, when you start doing something new, if you're in a new niche or new industry, there's going to be a lot of skepticism, right? Innovation breeds new ignorance. I've heard you say that. So in the sense of uniqueness, what I've allowed myself to do is just keep putting that gold, that good stuff out there and letting it land with people, but also looking for that relevance. How does it help them, right? How does it relate to them? And I think that relevance factor is really key, because then now I serve to my target audience, which is like these visionaries, these signal males, these people who are a little bit of a lone wolf and they're trying to do it in their own path. And so once they have that permission to actually be weird, be unique, be in their own lane, then they start to really shine. That's what I've noticed.
Be weird, unique, and relevant. I think I love that idea of relevance, because just being unique for the sake of being unique, okay, that has a certain amount of value, but I'm unique because I'm adding value, because you know what? If you're in the middle of the desert and you got your water, it's kind of nice to keep it cool, and so it's relevant to my journey that I don't just want water, I want cool water. And if I just buy the water by itself, it's not relevant, but by adding that cooler, it's unique and it's relevant to making my journey a better journey. And that separates me from the rest of the pack. I do this. I've just raised my prices. It's 6 months of coaching is $10K with the guarantee you're going to make your money back and double. And if you don't, I keep working with you until you do. That's unique. There's a lot of coaches say, buy my coaching. If you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. There's no guarantee. But by guaranteeing a result and standing by it and really helping people, like get that cash register to ring and double it, it separates me from all the other business coaches out there. And people appreciate the fact that they're not just getting coaching, but they're getting unique coaching. They're getting somebody that's going to help them get an outcome. I'm a stand that if you spend money with a business coach, your business should improve. And how many people sell business coaching with no guarantee whatsoever that business will improve? And so, you can guarantee it different ways. You can bring that uniqueness different ways. But I think people really appreciate the relevance of, I'm not just buying a coach, but this guy is going to help me get a real positive outcome. I'm going to be better off at the cash register because I hired this guy.
Right. And I feel that there's that element of support that's so crucial, right? With a lot of business coaches, you may pay for a video program, then you can't even reach out back to the person almost, right? So
you can't even talk to a human being.
Exactly. So that support element, is so crucial in terms of really being that. Yeah, it's huge. Another thing is about improving your conditions. And oftentimes when we improve our conditions, we notice that we start to gain a lot more mastery, a lot more synchronicity start to happen. You start to improve your conditions. It's like you're actually looking after yourself. There's a certain level of self-care, which again comes with self-trust and self-love. And it all points back to the self, right? It has the word self in it, all of it. So in a sense,
I like that. When we talk about improving conditions, this is one of the most important and critical ideas in value. Think about it. We spend money on things that improve our conditions. Why do you get your brakes fixed on your car? Well, conditions of life are better when I know my brakes work. If I got brakes that don't work, why do you go out and have that nice meal at the restaurant? Well, life is better to eat out once in a while. Well, why do you cook barbecue at home? Well, because it's nice. It's nice to cook at home and barbecue with the family and friends. And so there's this common thread. So if it's true that we spend money on things that improve our conditions, in other words, we value those things that improve our conditions. If you, Sume, or anybody listening to this, you want to start receiving more money, the most important thing for you to communicate so that people understand and appreciate and desire is the fact that when you spend money with me, your conditions will improve. And if you can communicate that, I think you're going to find that people are going to spend a lot more money with you. They say, oh, I spend money with Mary. Mary makes my life better. So of course I'll spend money with Mary.
Totally. And it's like this idea of like quality leads, not quantity leads, right? Like, for instance, if you have the exact dream client, right, the exact niche of the person that you want to serve, you're going to have so much more fun improving their condition than somebody who's just like random off the street, that has nothing to do with business or your niche in that particular way. So, yeah, it's like really that qualification aspect of like working with somebody that you can improve their condition because you have that I got you energy. It's like that energy of like, yeah, I've been there in the past, man. I know how to do this. And
Yeah.
that's such a powerful element.
One of the things I learned from Paul Ross was, this idea of the doggy dinner bowl effect. Your dog is sitting there sleeping, and then you crack open the dog food can. Is the dog still sleeping? No, the dog is jumping up and down. Its tail is wagging. Its tongue is flapping around. It's salivating because the dog is like, oh, it's dinner time. Like this will improve my conditions. And so, if you can create the doggy dinner bowl effect, if you can demonstrate, like, you're hungry, and now I opened up the food, the gourmet food is coming out now. If I can get you salivating and jumping up and down and excited, that's the ultimate expression, I think, of value, is that people not only see the value at a logical level, but emotionally, viscerally, physiologically, tail wagging, tongue, like, isn't that like the ultimate goal of value, is to get people so excited that they not only see and understand logically, but like there's this emotional charge that happens? Isn't that like the ultimate expression of value?
Totally, yeah. And it's also like this level of like empathy that you have for people, like for your prospects. And I think that if you just imagine this whole, how we talk about elevator pitch, right?
Yeah.
So I almost like I'm in the elevator with my younger self, right? And if I'm there to tell that person how to get into flow, I was lost in my past. I had anxiety, depression, brain fog, addiction, all this kind of stuff. Now I'm in flow. I'm flowing. I have momentum. I've got it all, And so I have that reference point of what that younger me is facing. And so now I'm in the elevator with him. Now I know exactly the vibe to set, the tone to set, and what to do. It's like that level of empathy. You want to work with somebody that brings an emotional part of you, like brings up that nostalgia and gets you to actually, pull your greatest gifts out because you see yourself in them.
Yeah, I love that. That is so good because like what would what would you tell your 30-year younger self, like all the lessons you learned, like you were stuck and now you flow, and it's like now you can go back. I tell people that 6 months with Joe will save about 30 years off your business learning curve. But if you can like have empathy for like, okay, I know what it's like to suck at that, but I also know what it's like to overcome that. Like, it's so freaking valuable when you can have that empathy, and it's like, I know what you're going through, and you don't have to go through what you're going through, and I can like shortcut and get you there so much quicker. And if you just knew that I had those shortcuts, it's freaking valuable, and it could, it can really like change your life. Um, and when we have those kinds of life experiences, it's like, a lot of people, they say, oh, I don't mind learning in the school of hard knocks. And I'm like, dude, it's painful. You don't like there are small failures, but there's big failures, and they can be painful and they can be humiliating. And if I can save you from that and prevent you from that and get you like on the righteous path from the beginning, that's freaking valuable, And so I've made $1 million and I've lost everything, and it was humiliating and it was painful. And I think that's a large part of the value I offer today, is that you don't have to go through the pain that I went through. You don't have to have massive failure. You don't, and that's freaking valuable. And having that empathy is so important. Talk a little bit about the prize frame. You've heard me say that sales is like being on American Idol, except you're not the and tested, trying to impress the judges. You're Simon Cowell trying to assess who's worthy of the prize. Talk about a little bit about why it's valuable to know that you are the prize.
Yeah, it's like this sense of knowingness, right? And I think a lot of people, if they don't know how to sell, they're kind of not really person who's doing business well in a sense. And I think for that selling frame, you got to know that you bring the goodies, right? You got to know that you're the prize. You got to know that, in your back pocket, you have like an encyclopedic thing of information and you're just giving them this like little chunk, like this little free sample, right? And I think that once you know that you're the prize, not just saying it, but actually truly embodying it, like seeing your best self doing the things. And I think visualization is really key for this, for knowing that you're the prize, like understanding that you see yourself just so crystal clear doing it, and over delivering, and I think that's such a powerful image of getting rid of this neediness, right? It's getting rid of this feeling of like, oh, I must give or I have to do it like this. But instead, when you're the prize, you're coming from a higher frame, and that frame is really powerful because you're not leeching energy anymore, right?
No, you're giving value. Again, the measure of wealth is not how much you receive, but how much you give. And when you're, am I giving you bazooka bubble gum, or have I got the Willy Wonka golden ticket? It's like, this is not, I am not selling 5-cent, bubble gum. I've got the Willy Wonka golden ticket. And when you know that, and you know that you have that level of value, then you own a frame of the prize that makes it worth it for people to pay the extra price, because they're going to be so more benefited, so more advantageous, so much more conditions enhanced. It's pretty freaking golden.
Yeah, I have something to say about this prize thing. So I have this analogy in my mind of, let's say that your frame is like the way that you see reality, right? So basically, imagine that your reality is like a universe, dimension, a world. Like, let's say that you're Narnia, and somebody else that you're communicating to, they're Hogwarts, right? Now, you're not gonna stop being Narnia, like Wicked Witch and all this kind of stuff, and just start going through their sorting hat and go into their world. You're gonna stay with your frame. You know you're the prize, so you're gonna get them to travel to Narnia, right? And so that frame of understanding that I'm not approaching someone to sell them, they're entering my dimension, they're entering my reality. It's such a powerful shift.
Yeah. You're like Wizard of Oz. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful wizard. Now here's the thing too, though. Moving on to the next point, and that is, even if you have the prize, if you lack the confidence and you lack the self-esteem, then you're not going to come across as more valuable. Why don't you make this connection between having the prize, having the value, having the Willy Wonka golden ticket, but if you lack the confidence or the self-esteem, what good is it?
Right. It's like having the prize and then being the prize. Right. So
yeah,
it's such a powerful thing to have that confidence. Confidence comes from the word like Conman, right? Because it's a confidence man.
Well, the word confidence, it's con is with, and then fidelity. So it's like with fidelity, it's with purity. Now, the con man is somebody that convinces you, but they don't necessarily have the purity. Right. They're not the real deal, they're the fake deal.
Exactly. But it's interesting to know that, Conman was also known as the confidence man, in the sense that he'd be like, oh, here's my watch, you can have it tomorrow, and then he'd never return, right? So this confide, or to confide in someone, right, is this secret, this trust, this understanding that, yeah, this is a person that I can trust, right? So if you don't trust yourself being the prize, how can you trust somebody else knowing that they're there to deserve your prize, right? So
yeah, it's like I'm the prize, but I'm not sure I'm the prize, so I bring that uncertainty to the table, and so then my value is diminished because of the way I'm showing up.
right? And a lot of people, they don't command what they want, right, in their life. They'll be like, oh, I want, you just stayed into the universe. And this is a weird kind of superficial example, but it's like, let's say that you want a woman in your life that's blonde. You don't want to be like, yeah, maybe she's blonde, but also brunette's okay. But then also, yeah, I guess I like redheads too. And, it's like this meandering type of energy, right? It's like the sense. But if you just claim and command out into the universe, like, this is what I want, there's a difference in that. And I think that confidence to claim your reality, your truth, is so powerful. And it comes
what good is your truth if you really don't even fully own it? Like, then it's not really even your truth, and there's less value there. This next one I want to share is I was in this class. It was through Landmark, and there was a girl in the class, and she was an actress, and she was very pretty, and she did martial arts, and she was in the Screen Actors Guild. She was in the union, and but the truth is that she was going on lots of auditions, and she wasn't getting a lot of gigs. And during this effectiveness seminar, she really recognized that she wanted the gig because it kind of represented her car payment or her rent payment, and she invented a new possibility. She realized she wasn't that valuable because I need the money for my rent. So during this seminar, she reinvented a new possibility to show up as a massive contribution to the audition, to show up as a massive contribution to the director, and to show up as a massive contribution to the overall success of the project. And you know what? She was a lot more valuable from this. And what happened is during this 10-week seminar series, she got a TV commercial, another TV commercial, a Netflix gig, and a TV commercial. And I was like, wow, like that is freaking valuable. And it's working so well for her, I adapted it for myself. So when I show up for clients that pay me, if I just show up for a 30-minute speech, if I just show up on a Clubhouse conversation, my job is to show up as a massive contribution to the people that I show up as. And because I'm not holding back, because I'm not a partial contribution or a small contribution, I'm a massive contribution. Even though nobody's paying me, people see that huge value, and it makes them want to work with me. And so I witnessed it, first of all, working for her, and then I adopted it for myself, and it worked so powerfully. I've gotten a lot of clients as a result of showing up as that massive contribution. What comes up for you with just this idea of, so it's giving generously is important, but giving with wisdom. You don't want to give foolishly. What comes up for you as I share this idea of becoming that massive contribution and giving in that way?
Yeah, I think it's changed my business in terms of just showing up fully and not showing up partially. I think being a massive contribution, that you have the knowledge, you have everything under control. And so when you're giving massive contribution, it's like, that there's a lot to give, right? And so it's like spilling out of you almost, in a sense of like, you're not there to try to change somebody's mind. You're just there to basically be no mind, right? You're there to be flow.
It's a way of being.
Yeah,
it's like totally. Being that person. It's like, I learned this idea that when you listen, you're the void, and when you speak, you're the universe. And when you're listening to somebody's problems, you just really become invisible and just become that sponge to really soak up and understand. But then when you have that opportunity to speak, you speak with the power of the universe. And that is valuable.
Totally, yeah. That's a really great point, because a lot of people, if you're not listening to what somebody's telling you, you can't actually find the different elements of value that you're getting from them, right? So there could be little pieces that you're missing all the time if you're not listening fully. So yeah, if you're this active listener and you're this on-stage body and off-stage body, right? When you have this on-stage body, it's like your entire body's in it, and you're listening with your whole beingness. rather than just being like kind of like nodding. You know how people do this? It's like they're sort of like doing this, but they're not really. It's like going in one ear and going out the other.
They're not fully present.
Exactly, and I think it's about that presence. And I say presence rather than present moment, which sounds like a full stop, because the present moment is always going to pass you by, but presence is more about
Have more flow.
yeah, that flow, exactly.
Now, I want to go on this other, this idea of giving generously, but also giving with wisdom. We don't want to give foolishly. There are givers and takers, talkers and doers. There are people that you could give and give and give, and they will never give back. And one of the ideas I learned about giving with wisdom is give to the givers, because givers are wired to give back. Takers will not give back. And what comes up for you about giving with wisdom versus just giving foolishly?
Yeah, it's that understanding of, thinking of relationships, right? So there's this idea of codependence, which is like, it's one-sided, right? Your friends are their friends. They're sharing everything with you. It's like it becomes so dependent that it's so one-sided. But then there's independence, which is the next stage, I feel like. It's like, I don't need a relationship. I'm fine by myself. I got this. And then there's this third level of interdependence, which is that synergy. And I think that's so powerful when it comes to giving with wisdom and, being able to, generously give with wisdom. That there's this synergy that's taking place. There's this reciprocity. So when you do give, you're getting it back. And it's this wonderful thing when you can have that with somebody, this generator energy. Yeah.
I learned from one of my mentors, Taki Moore, that when you give freely of your information, you then earn the right and the privilege to charge a premium for implementation. And, so one of the things I do is I make some videos. People ask questions like, what's the right business for me? Or how do I, choose my business wisely? Or how do I share the love to market myself? And so I get these questions so much. I've made some videos. And so, like, I can't give somebody my one-on-one time is my premium time. Okay. But, if I meet a new person, it's like, hey, here's 5 videos, watch these videos. So I can give freely of my information. And then if they want to actually work with me, because I've given so freely good information, I've earned the right and the privilege to charge a premium. Now it's like, okay, you want my one-on-one time. I do this thing, let me buy you an hour of my time. Like, anybody on the planet, I'll buy you that first hour of my time. But after that, I kind of become compassion for hire. Like, if you pay me, I care. And if you don't pay, I don't care. I can invest an hour into anybody on the planet, but I can't invest 6 months or a year into somebody. Okay. And so what comes up for you around this idea of if you give away freely of your information, you earn the right and privilege to charge a premium for your personal attention or for implementation?
Yeah, I think people know exactly what to do at times, but they're not taking enough action. It's like when you do the thing, you get the power. That's like a quote that I heard a long time ago. It's like, once you have somebody with that accountability really pushing you to take that action, Joe, you call it implementation velocity, right? It's like you get someone to take action faster. And yeah, I think that a lot of people want to know how to do it, right? It's like we're being told in schools like how to concentrate, like not how to concentrate, we're just being told to concentrate, right? So the how is a different story. Like the how, you gotta, really read about it, learn about it, and start to take action on it. And I think that a lot of people, they talk about it, but then they don't actually take the steps to get there. So I think
one of the things I learned is you got to show people that you have the know-how, KNOWHOW, but you don't give them no and none of the how. So I'm going to give you freely to show you that I have the know-how. But if you want to know how, if you want to like the step-by-step, you're going to have to get out your credit card and pay.
That's powerful. I like that one.
Know-how. Okay. I think another thing about this is we're covering a lot of ground today.
Yeah, this is an awesome podcast. Everybody click subscribe.
Click subscribe now. And if you're ready to hire Joe or Sume, reach out to us. Another thing about value is this idea of speaking into somebody's listening. You know, I think one of the reasons a lot of people don't buy coaching, for example, is because it's like their arms are crossed. It's like you're talking and you're trying to sell me, but you don't really know what's going on with me. And if we're really good in the process of communication where I can ask good questions, if I can demonstrate, there's this Wyatt Woodsmall quote that if you can demonstrate that you understand the prospect's problems better than they do, they will come to the unconscious conclusion that you also understand the solutions. And so, if you're really good as a listener and you ask good questions and you can mirror back and speak into somebody's listening to demonstrate, I understand what's going on with you better than you understand what's going on with you, then all of a sudden the arms become uncrossed. It's like, wow, hallelujah, amen. Somebody finally has come along that understands what I'm going through, and they understand the problems, they understand the solutions. It's like, finally, that's valuable. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Totally. It's like building that sense of rapport with someone, right? And when you first meet somebody, they might be very closed off. One of the Joeisms that I heard a while back was the problem you think is the problem is not exactly the problem, right? So there is this idea of mirror neurons, right? Like there's this idea of mirroring, of course. Like if you subtly mirror somebody, they're going to trust you a lot more. And you want to do it in a subtle way, right? If someone has their hands crossed, you don't want to just cross your hands the whole time. Maybe you do it a little bit subtly. And I think that it's so powerful when we're learning these different techniques. And, NLP people try and do this all the time, this idea of what learner style are you, right? So if somebody is, let's say, an auditory learning style, you say things like, I hear what you're saying, rather than I see what you're saying or I feel you, right? So once you actually use that vocabulary, let's call it, once you use that, it starts people really getting to trust you and getting that credibility up. And a lot of people, they're trying to memorize a sales script, right? It's like so automated, it's so autopilot. But once you get to that level of like, I'm actually listening to what they're telling me and I'm responding back accordingly to the truth that I know. It's like going into your heart and like just learning to speak from the heart. And oftentimes that really does the trick. I don't even want to say trick because it's not really a trick, but it's this idea.
It's actually one of the most genuine things you could do.
Exactly. And I think, like I was saying about quality leads, it's also quality communication, right? You don't want to just communicate and have a weak line of communication with someone. Those people that you text and they just reply back with K. How that annoys me. Yeah, it's like that idea of, okay, I hear you, and that's why those clarifying statements, right, that are, is this comfortable? Are you comfortable with what I'm saying? Do you understand? Like all this kind of stuff really helps to clarify that too, for sure.
I love that. I was listening to an interview one day on the radio, and they were talking about how we humans think we're so smart and sophisticated and we communicate so well. And this marine biologist was talking about dolphins and how dolphins do not like speak in words. They ping. They actually use sonar, so they ping into the environment and then they receive a 3D image. And then when they communicate with another dolphin, they don't like use sounds, but they actually transmit like a 3D image, like a holographic 3D image. And it's like we think we're so smart and intelligent, but there's this idea of communicating in 3D, communicating with NLP. Like communicating in a way that we use powerful imagery. And it reminds me of the stuff I learned. I used to be the marketing director for Paul Ross over at Speed Seduction. And he used to say, anything that you communicate that is not somebody else's idea can be resisted. And, anything that, like, if I communicate to you in such a way that, like, you feel like I'm trying to persuade you, you're going to resist it. But if I communicate to you in a way that you like imagine it as your own thought, it will not be resisted. So the key skill is to capture and lead the imagination. If you communicate like, I want to have, like, let's be lovers, that may be resisted. But if I communicate it in a way where she's imagining that she wants to be my lover and it's her imagination and her idea, she's not going to resist it. Why don't you talk a little bit about the skill of adding value by capturing and leading the imagination?
So powerful. I think this is one of those things that we really overlook, and a lot of people overlook this skill set of the imagination. But the space for memory and imagination is found in the same part of your brain, right? So the circle mechanism. So if you're using memories that, imagery that conjures up a lot of feeling, like, you're actually tapping into a specific part of their brain, right? And it's all about that subconscious mind. Everybody wants to talk about the subconscious mind, power of subconscious mind, right? But really using it and being able to optimize that is a whole different ballgame. And I think NLP does this really well. But I love this idea of the mind doesn't listen to negation, right? It doesn't listen to words like non or don't or no. It just responds to the images, the whole don't think of pink elephants thing, right? So
don't think about hot sex. Don't do it.
Don't do it, right? So you could actually use this in your sales calls, right? You could be like, don't reach back out to me. Don't follow me on social media. You don't need to, like, and actually that creates the images of that. And it's such a powerful tool. Now, not to use this in terms of manipulation, but just being able to know what the mind really does and what it's capable of just sets you free. It really sets you free. And once you can use that, like, I love listening to subliminal messages and things like this, like, just to reprogram my subconscious mind. And it just gets me so many results. It's such a powerful tool to be able to actually do that. So
yeah, we have a mutual friend, Hypnotica, who puts a lot of really good trance work out there, and he's really helped a lot of men just really add a lot of value to their lives by using the power of language and suggestion and the subconscious mind to reprogram more powerful pathways in the brain. And it's so valuable when we can bypass the conscious mind and go straight into that part that processes and opens up the gateways and the pathways. Now really connected to this, I think, is when we talk about value, using the imagination. One of the great ways to use the imagination is through storytelling. And you'll hear me say this all the time, that nobody wants to hear an advertisement, but everybody likes a good once upon a time. And you've written your book TPN and talked about theatroplasticity method and using theater methods for change. And why don't you talk a little bit about how storytelling is such a way to communicate, articulate, and get value across other people?
I think stories are very powerful because, again, they relate to the archetypes, which is basically that's the connection between our unconscious and our conscious mind. Is the personal unconscious, right? That archetypes are like symbols, and those are through stories, right? Myths, images. So when we tell a really good story, it just resonates with people. They light up. They understand that there's a specific process to it. And it's a very unconscious process, like we were saying earlier, in terms of the subconscious mind. So, this idea of being a storyteller, you start to captivate the audience as you're telling these stories. And I think in this attention economy, we've got to learn how to captivate, or otherwise we're going to lose it because of this oversaturation. So being a great storyteller, it's like imagining that, what if you could be that person who's, around the campfire, like telling these stories around the bonfire, like creating that specific vibe that we all resonate with, right? It's like
Yeah.
we great storytellers. We love people who can create those images in our minds. And I think that once you have that and you can sort of pull from that world and use it with your copywriting, use it with anything, it really starts to resonate with people. And I think that, yeah, just use more stories for sure.
You know, I can tell people all day long I'm a great business coach, and at a logical level, it kind of gets in. But when I use this story. Once upon a time, an entrepreneur was walking down the street and he fell into a hole, and he's screaming for help. And a man comes along and throws in some money, but the man is still in the hole. And then a priest comes by and hears the screams for help, and he says some prayers of comfort and drops in a Bible, but the man is still in the hole. And a medical doctor comes by and hears the screams for help and drops in some drugs and prescriptions, but the man is still in the hole. And then a friend came along and he heard the screams for help and he jumped in the hole with him. Now the man was living. He says, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? Now we're both in this hole together." And the friend said, "That's true, but I've been in this hole before and I know the way out. Follow me and let me show you the way. My name is Joe Nicasio, and even though you think you need money or prayers or medicines, what you really need is a mentor that will jump in the hole with you, roll up your sleeves, and show you the way out so you can succeed as an entrepreneur. And that's why you should hire me as your business coach, because I will show you the way to succeed." Being that like people, I saw that story, and depending on the time and the place I tell it, I've had people say I got goosebumps. It creates such a valuable response. It transcends logic. It hits people at this emotional level, and so I think part of our job in terms of communicating our value, and we're talking about value and flow with Sume and Joe as our topic of today, is if we can communicate completely with no surprises. I think it's valuable that we communicate in a way where we don't just say it, but we say it so they get it and they understand it and they desire it and they're ready to pay for it.
Totally. I'm reminded of this one story of this old man who, through all of life, and he's moving into his retirement home, and this woman shows him around the retirement home, through these different places, takes him through the lounge, takes him through the swimming pool, and he's kind of just taking everything in. He's smiling really a lot, and this woman's kind of looking at him like, oh, why is he so happy? And he goes around, and suddenly he just blurts out of the blue. He's like, "I love it. I'll take it. It's brilliant. It's fantastic." And she's like, "But, sir, you haven't even seen this room yet," or something like that. And he goes, "Young lady, it's not about the furniture out there and the way it's arranged. It's about the furniture in my mind. And the way I see it up here, I love it." I love that story because it's so much about, creating those images in the mind, right? That's so important to people. It's not about what's out there. It's about what's going on in here. And when you can be that storyteller, you can create images in the mind for people. And you can really change a lot for them.
Yeah, another thing about value, I love that story, by the way. When we do work with people, like I do coaching with people, and they come to me with a problem, and I have a solution to that problem, but it's not just a solution that lasts a day or a week or a month. I teach people business building skills that they can use to prosper for the rest of their life. There's a long-term impact. And a large part of our value isn't just the fact that they hire, Joe or Sume to help with their business or with their flow, but the fact that the skills that we transfer are lifetime skills. And why don't you talk a little bit about how long-term impact is a large part of the value, and a lot of people don't necessarily communicate that part of their value.
Yeah. I think we live in an age and era of instant gratification. You know, there's a lot of things just handed to us very quickly, and so we're led to believe that there is a magical out there. There is abs in 20 days. You know, there is this example of
7 minute abs.
exactly right. And so once we change that paradigm, you know, the Greeks had a word for it. I actually have this tattoo on the side of my ribs. You know, it's called eudaimonia. Now, eudaimonia is a concept which means long-term happiness. Right? This idea of flourishing. So it's not the short hedonic bursts of happiness, like just having a drink or going out or something like that. It's much more of like a growth mindset. It's like building a family or building a business or understanding that you're going to leave a mark or a legacy. And that brings you a certain level of fulfillment that I think really starts to change your mindset around it. I think as we grow older, as we break away from that adolescence, adultolescence world, we slowly become mature, we start thinking more long term. And once we start thinking more long term, we start to really look forward to something. And I think happiness is that consciousness of growth. Like when you're looking forward to a passion project or something that's happening in the future, you're going to travel, right? Joe, you're going to, Hawaii. Like that's exciting, right? So it creates this future projection and this image and this drive. So once you can communicate that, and I think you told me this once, it's like, don't sell people the plane ticket, sell them Hawaii. Like sell them the end
destination.
Yeah,
experience.
Exactly. That's so important.
We're going to wrap this up here. I'm going to talk a little bit about taking a stand. I'll tell a little story about why I take a stand, and maybe you'll have a story to wrap up with, and we'll bring this thing to some closure today. I think we've had a really good conversation today about value and flow and giving and receiving. And, one of the stories I like to tell is, once upon a time, a man walked onto a construction site and there were 3 men working. And he asked the first man, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm laying bricks." He asked the second man, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm building a wall." And he asked the third guy, "What are you doing?" And he stood and smiled and looked to the heavens and said, "I'm building a cathedral." And if you're tired of laying bricks in your business and building walls, and you really want to build a business cathedral, I'm Joe Nicasio. I can help you do that. And one of the things I've learned is if you build a business on hustle, if you build a cathedral on hustle, it may not endure, because if you want to build an enduring cathedral, it starts with a strong blueprint, and it also starts with a strong foundation. And I'm Joe Nicasio, and I take a stand that if you're going to build a business, you might as well blueprint it properly and build it on a strong foundation. I take a stand that if you build your business cathedral on a good blueprint and a strong foundation, I am certain that it can endure for centuries. And I take a stand for that, and I believe that it's valuable to actually have a coach and a mentor and a trusted advisor in your corner that isn't just about helping you make the fast buck, but actually somebody that takes a stand for you to build something, get it right the first time, and build something that endures. And so I believe that taking a stand is the last thing I wanted to talk about flow and value. And I want to pass it to you. Maybe you have something you can wrap up with and create some closure around this conversation about value and flow today.
Absolutely. If you know what you stand for, you got to know what you don't stand for. And earlier to being in flow, I had to know what the opposite of that was. And really knowing that was my enemy. That was my enemy. That was my demon that I was fighting. And once you speak with the enemy in mind, you become a very powerful communicator and a salesman and a trusted advisor. Because once you can stand for something, it starts to change everything. And I think that a lot of coaches out there will be very peak performance or very mindfulness, What I'm doing is I'm taking a stand for mindful peak performance. And so it's not about going with the flow, it's about being the flow. And once you can understand that you can be the captain of your soul, I want to just end with this passage from Leviticus. And I think that's going to put the nail right on the head. So it matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Thank you so much. Have an incredible rest of your day. May the flow be with you. Joe, we did it again.
We did it again. More business flow with Sume and Joe. Tune in for the next episode. And we promise to keep bringing on the heat and bringing on the value and bringing on the wisdom and helping you guys flow in your business, in your cash flow, and in your lives. This is Joe Nicasio signing out with Sume Chatterjee. God bless y'all and have a great day.